In this video, we'll learn about the terms latency and jitter and why these terms are important to us when understanding our network performance. So let's start with latency. Latency is the delay. So essentially, how long does it take data to travel from one device to another? And we measure latency in milliseconds. So for example, if I'm on my computer, we'll call it computer A, and I try to ping another computer and I get a reply back 40 milliseconds later, that tells me how much latency we are experiencing. And a good analogy is dropping a letter in the mail. So if I'm going to send a letter, how long is it going to take to reach its destination? That would be the latency. Maybe it's 1 day, maybe it's 2 days, who knows? But that's a good analogy for latency in a computer network, is how long does it take data to get from the source to the destination? Now, jitter is a little bit different, but it involves latency. Jitter defines the variation in latency when packets don't arrive at consistent times. And this is also measured in milliseconds. And so if we're sending traffic over the internet, for example, it might take different paths, or those internet connections and all of those backbone networks might be really busy, or they might not be so busy. So those variations in performance, those are going to be measured using jitter. And again, I love to use an analogy. So let's imagine that you are at a bus stop and the bus is supposed to arrive every 10 minutes. But sometimes buses are only 5 minutes apart, or sometimes they're 15 minutes apart. That variation in latency is what we call jitter. So why do latency and jitter matter? Well, if we're just browsing the internet or downloading files, these small delays don't usually matter too much to us, right? We don't really care if it takes 3 seconds or 4 seconds to download a file. It's not really a big deal. But once we start doing things like Zoom calls or voice over IP conversations, that's where latency and jitter become really important. Because if there's too much latency, let's imagine a Zoom call where you're speaking to somebody over the internet. Well, if there's a lot of latency, there's going to be delay. I might say something, but the person on the other end might not hear it for a second. And they might start talking thinking that I'm not saying anything. And so people start to talk over each other, for example. That's one of the problems that are introduced by latency. Or jitter will make a call sound choppy, like a broken record, or it'll make your videos freeze and skip. These are probably things that all of you have experienced when you're on a video call over the internet. So understanding latency and jitter is really important if you're dealing with real-time communications like voice or video. Okay, so let's very quickly review what we've just learned. Latency is delay. How long does it take my data to get from source to destination? And we measure latency in milliseconds. We also measure jitter, but jitter is the amount of variation that we're experiencing in latency. So if I send 100 packets across the internet, what is the difference in the latency between those different packets? And this is really important for real-time traffic like voice calls or video calls.